2024 certainly was a year for video games. Some good, some bad.
Sometimes maybe good, sometimes maybe...
A ton more people laid off from their jobs, and a ton of disappointments. Now, disappointing doesn't outright mean bad, but I'm gonna be honest, a lot of these games will probably overlap on a top 10 worst list as well. So without further delay, let's get started. Concord. I have to be honest, I've been dying for a hero shooter to finally take the reins away from Overwatch for years. I played a lot of Paladins and Rogue Company, and while both I find amazing, just didn't have the same, quality to them. Concord, with a $400 million budget or however much it cost, while from a gameplay standpoint actually played pretty good, the problem was the god-awful character designs. Holy crap, who approved of such grade A slop? These are some of the worst looking, uninspired, bland, ugly-looking characters I've seen in gaming, let alone the hero genre as a whole. It was also $40, which didn't help at all. The game came out and was dead and buried within 2 weeks, and the servers were shut down and the studio closed. This is the biggest flop in, I think, Sony's history. Thank God Marvel Rivals came out and blew up in popularity. I'm having an absolute, blast with it, and just hit Grandmaster 3 myself, thank you very much. Took a little longer than I would have liked, but solo queue is a cruel mistress. Hopefully, with its success, Overwatch will slowly die out after the crap they pulled with Overwatch 2, and they certainly deserve it.
Society has rules. It decides where you belong and what you're worth.
Skull and Bones. This should have been the easiest layup in gaming history. All that was required was to take Assassin's Creed 4's blueprint and duplicate it for a live service multiplayer type game. Sadly, Skull and Bones wasn't able to capitalize on this demand, largely because of the time spent in development hell. Skull and Bones first began development around 2013, as it reportedly changed direction a number of times since. As the dawn of its first release, finally coming out, Ubisoft's CEO infamously declared it to be the company's first ever quadruple A game, one of the most laughable quotes ever uttered in game development. I don't understand how such a simple concept could take over 10 years to come to fruition and fail spectacularly at everything. What a waste of time and talent. Here's hoping the rumored Black Flag remake makes up for it.
If I want to survive, I have to play their game. Looks like I'm all in.
Star Wars Outlaws. Another game that should have been an easy layup. The idea was sound. We get to finally play a Han Solo type scoundrel. Unfortunately, the character is extremely unlikable and strangely weird looking despite the model's real life beauty. Add on the fact that stealth in forced segments are utterly broken and the game falls apart quickly. They tried to fix it with patches later on and updates to mend over the mass problems the game has, but it was too late. Let alone it's just another mediocre, mindless Ubisoft open world game. We're all sick of them at this point, right? Worse still, its lukewarm launch caused Ubisoft stock to plummet, and sales underperformed big time. And with the lukewarm reception at best for the upcoming delayed Assassin's Creed Shadows, Ubisoft is all but dead in the water after the abysmal year in 2024 they had.
Your simulation days are over, Trooper. This is a real battle.
Right, move out.
No retreats.
Form up.
No excuses.
Star Wars Battlefront Classic Collection. I know I keep using the word, layup often, so let's try another basketball term. Taking two of the best multiplayer games of all time and bringing them to modern audiences with ease of access online play should have been a slam dunk. Sadly, the Battlefront games launched with the smallest licks of paint to polish, broken servers, missing modes featured in the original, and a full price tag. Honestly, you're better off playing the 2017 Battlefront 2, as bad as it is, or even better, just get the originals on Steam for far less of a price. The Star Wars IP took a lot of nasty licks this year, in games and television, and this was sadly one of its worst offenders.
At last, the bell has tolled on the age of the console. return of the Sovereign.
Dragon's Dogma 2. Now, this disappointment doesn't necessarily come as a surprise, as I knew what I was in for having played the original and its expansion Dark Arisen way back on the PS3 and PS4, but I had hoped some things would be improved upon for its sequel. Turns out it's pretty much the exact same game. Lack of enemy or quest variety, most vocations felt bad to use, the god-awful fast travel system is still as bad as I remember in the original, the beast weapons and armor can be bought, so there really isn't any point to exploring all the caves and ruins. While the map certainly looks big, don't be fooled, it's actually pretty linear and a lot of it is walled off. This is a game that either should have stayed as a one-off or upgraded enough to warrant such a lengthy time between sequels. Rise of the Ronin. An open-world Team Ninja game. On paper, it sounds like an easy W, but it just ends up showing the weaknesses of the studio and what they do and don't excel at. The game has ambition, and I praise Team Ninja for what they tried to accomplish, but the lack of polish all around is almost criminal. Some open-world games on the 360 PS3 era look better than this. Rise of the Ronin dilutes the great gameplay of Nioh and Wolong to accommodate for an open world that offers little of value. Combat is still great despite this, and the bond system is interesting, but it could have been so much better. They unfortunately went with a quantity over quality with this game, and either more time in the oven or slimming it down to something more linear might have been the way to go. It's no Ghost of Tsushima, that's for damn sure.
One has to ask, them dead, who shall take the throne?
Metaphor Refantasio. I know, I'm insane. This is probably the most contrarian take on this list, but I just can't seem to get into this game. I was never really a huge Persona fan. 4 is probably the only one I've ever replayed more than once, and 5 was an absolute chore to get through. I had hoped leaving the school setting behind and going full fantasy would help me with this game, and it certainly did, but it's essentially just Persona in a fantasy setting. I was hoping for something different, but almost all of the same mechanics are here, just very slightly altered. This is clearly a game made for Persona fans, but I couldn't help but be disappointed with the gameplay. The setting, story, and characters are top-notch, but just not enough for me personally. I hate myself for not liking this game as much as everyone else.
Hey buddy, you mentioned something about research for a story.
That's right. Got a tip that something big's happening.
You gotta be kidding me.
Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster. Dead Rising, a game that defined the 360 in its early days for me. Well, that and Gears of War. Those two games hardly left my system until Halo 3 finally released. While Dead Rising has lost its way as a franchise in recent years, it's still something I look back fondly on, despite my dislike of the timer mechanic. Yes, I know, sue me. So getting the chance to go back and relive the original with updated controls, better graphics, and quality of life improvements was all I needed to pick it up. Sadly, Frank has been hit with the ugly stick in the remake, and TJ Rotolo, the voice actor, famous for voicing Frank,
Kinda. I've covered wars,
was nowhere to be found. Hell, even some of the other cast that's been replaced sound worse in comparison. This game would have been on my best of 2024 list if not for these simple changes, as picky as they are, I admit that. Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. From riches to rags, oh what has Rocksteady become? Once the leader of superhero games with the absolutely incredible Batman Arkham trilogy. I also really like Origins and Shadow, but those were done by different studios. Rocksteady must have had a gun put to their heads from WB to chase the live service genre, because how can you go from one of the most successful and critically lauded trilogies of games of all time to Kill the Justice League? Suicide Squad was supposed to be the video game adaptation somewhat based on the movies, only we have the fascinating plot about killing each member of the Justice League due to Brainiac's, evil influences controlling them and making them evil. Kill the Justice League is full of copy and paste missions, painfully slow XP grinds, repetitive content, and heinous, absolutely disgustingly bad narrative decisions undermining and destroying Rocksteady's beautifully molded Arkham universe. This game actively makes those games worse now. So let's all pretend this game doesn't exist and never happened and wasn't, poor Kevin Conroy's final Batman video game performance. Rest in peace, Kevin. Your legacy deserved better than what this game provided.
Events are weaving together quickly. The fate of the world shall be decided soon.
Dragon Age: The Veilguard. To be honest, I should have known this game was going to be bad. 10 years of development, changing direction multiple times, all the good talented writers and people at BioWare are long gone, and I had hope for this game because it's one of my favorite franchises. Boy, was I and everyone wrong. This game, while having somewhat decent gameplay at least in the combat department, in my opinion, fails at absolutely everything else. The story, the characters, the past choices, the writing, the locations, everything about this game fails to measure up to any of the previous Dragon Age games. BioWare at this point is just a shell of its former self, and if you think Mass Effect 5 is going to be any different, you're sadly mistaken. Gone are the days of great games like Knights of the Old Republic and Dragon Age Origins or the Mass Effect trilogy. This is the BioWare we're left with now, and I don't see that changing back like ever. Then those were my top 10 most disappointing games of 2024. Some of these games will definitely overlap with the worst list, but that's for another day. How many on this list are on your own list? What's not here that you think should have been included, or you personally felt disappointed by? Let me know in the comments. I appreciate each and every one of you watching who made it this far in the video, or just skipped ahead to see number 1. Anyways, thanks for watching. Talk to you next time.